Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett. I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on the John Campea YouTube channel. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Robservations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse. And today, your streaming Santa of sci-fi. In addition to being your sommelier of sci-fi or cinema, your evangelist of the imagination and the still as yet undefined existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I'm coming at you on Christmas Day 2022. Mele Kalikimaka, if you're Hawaiian. I'm going to admit something to you all. I watched White Christmas for the first time last night. I know I'd never seen it before. Directed by the great Michael Curtiz, who also directed Casablanca, mid-1950s movie, starring Bing Crosby and Rosemary Clooney. And, of course, the great Danny Kaye, the court jester himself. And I got to tell you, it's a fucking good movie. Really good movie, really smart script, really enjoyed myself, never seen it before. See, here's the thing, with all my talk and all my smack talk about physical media, here's the thing about everybody who has a big physical media collection. They might not tell you this, but here's one of the reasons we have it. Because when people come over, we want to impress them with our movie collection. That's what we want to do, impress them. So, yes, pick a movie. We'll have it in our collection. Well, Elizabeth's dad, Murray, who's a very esteemed doctor in Loma Linda, California, whole wing of the hospital named after him, very impressive gentleman. He asked me a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, he said, "What Danny Kaye movies do you have?" The answer was none. I had no Danny Kaye movies, which really, because there was a girl I used to date, she'd be horrified that I didn't have any Danny Kaye movies. And I'm like, I know I have the court jester. Maybe no Danny Kaye movies. So I made a plan. One of the great Danny Kaye movies of all time. As a matter of fact, if you read about how he got involved in this film, because it was a very roundabout way that he got involved in. He got involved late. You know, I mean, it was Fred Astaire was going to be in this movie. Donald O'Connor was going to be in this movie. Danny Kaye moved in at the last minute, cut himself a sweet deal, made a lot of money. But I'm like, bro, I went for White Christmas. I know we were going to have to watch a Christmas movie, and I still have to atone for showing him Die Hard a few years back. I mean, he's an Adventist doctor, and I offended him. I mean, he'd never say that, but I know I did. So I had to make amends. I had to get a Danny Kaye movie, and I had to get a Christmas movie. Killed two birds with one stone. Got White Christmas, and to be fair, I'd never seen it. You know, I mean, for me, as a young Jewish kid growing up, I love the Rankin and Bass, put one foot in front of the other, and soon you'll be walking out the door. I love that. You know, I loved Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. I love The Year Without a Santa Claus, which is kind of off-brand, a little pagan, but awesome. I'm Mr. Heat Miser, I'm Mr. Sun, I'm Mr. Green Christmas, I'm Mr. 101, but I'd never seen White Christmas. Fantastic film. I loved it. Some people complained. I went back. You know, whenever I see a classic film that I've never seen. I delve into its history. I read reviews, go back and how was it accepted at the time? Not a universal classic, according to some people. Even though it wasn't a Universal movie, it was a Paramount movie. Interestingly enough, for all of you film historians out there, it was the first VistaVision movie ever made, which was Paramount's wide. It wasn't like Panavision widescreen, but it was wider gauge cinema, bigger image on the negative, looked beautiful. I mean, even though it was a very stage-bound movie, it had a great look to it. So you go, Michael Curtiz. Speaking of Michael Curtiz, I'll show it tomorrow. Anyway, Warner Home Video released an incredible version of Michael Curtiz's Casablanca. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about on Christmas Day 2022, I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things, but mostly about why are prestige Hollywood products bombing. But before I get to that, and go with me on this, you know I read viewer mail. I've got a lot of viewer mail I'm going to read, but I would like to read a notice, a missive that I received on Twitter. Because, you know, I leave my DMs open. You can slide into my DMs on Twitter. Burnett RM on Twitter. Find me. You can slide in. I'm very active on Twitter. I might answer you. You know, I have no ego to bruise. Say what you want. But anyway, Gaurav wrote me. He'd written me before. Gaurav wrote me some missives starting yesterday at 1:52 a.m. in the morning. So, Gaurav, you might have been drinking or just enjoying yourself. And if you're not drinking now, hey, allow me. I've got a little Francis Coppola Pinot Noir, just so you know, and it's in a wine glass. Actually, this is a college wine glass for all of you who don't know. Pint glasses are ubiquitous. And what can I say? I'm drinking wine out of a pint glass. Sue me. Sue me. God damn, I love wine. There's a reason why it was in the Bible. So anyway, Gaurav wrote me. Now, he's a fan. And, you know, if nothing else, I'm trying to be inclusive. The whole point of this channel is to give people a voice to speak, but it's an exchange. It's an exchange of ideas, exchange of information. And I am the first person to say, if I say something you don't agree with, call me out. Let's talk about it. Let's have a discussion. If you vehemently disagree with something I've said, you are welcome here to come talk to me about it. So we've been talking a lot about James Gunn, the Henry Cavill situation with Superman over there on the John Campea show. And of course, there are a lot of very passionate Zack Snyder fans. By the way, I will say this. I don't know where people have been. But I was the biggest supporter of Man of Steel from the get-go. From the get. Really like Man of Steel. I used to say that there is no Snyder cut of the Justice League. Meaning what I was saying and what was clearly not understood. A lot of people who don't make films, I am a editor, I'm a post supervisor. When someone says there is a cut of a movie, I understand that can mean many different things. But when someone says there's a cut, it means to me it's an incomplete cut of a film that you can actually now watch. When someone says to me, fellow editor, fellow filmmaker says, we have a cut. When you have a cut, that means, in my mind, it's unfinished, but you can sit down and watch it from beginning to end. That doesn't mean it's... Let me just tell you this. The very first time, to name drop, that I ever saw Return of the King, I watched, I think it was probably 4 hours. I watched it in Peter Jackson's house. He showed us a cut of Return of the King. This was January of 2003. The movie didn't come out till Christmas of 2003. It was a very rough cut. It was not meant to be shown to anyone outside of the industry or who didn't have a working knowledge of what they were seeing. A lot of animatics, a lot of unfinished effect shots. In fact, I don't even know if there was one finished effect shot. And this was a year beforehand. Very rough. So when someone says they have a cut, I always think back to the cut of Return of the King I first saw. It was very apparent in that version what the movie was going to be like. That we all knew. This was when I was working on the special features for the extended versions of Fellowship and Two Towers. We all knew. This is when we began work on, because the extended version of Two Towers was going to come out right before Return of the King opened. It was very apparent. We already knew what we were in for, and I was in New Zealand for months doing interviews and recording commentary and shooting behind-the-scenes footage for Two Towers. But Peter was gracious enough to show us this version of the movie in his house. So to me, I knew when Zack Snyder said, oh yeah, there's a cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League, that it was unfinished. And I told people this. I said, there is no, because people thought that there was a finished version, some kind of, well, they can, no filmmaker, first of all, wants to put out a cut. We have a cut. They want to put out all filmmakers. And when I say this, I mean every filmmaker that has ever lived on Earth has never wanted to release a version of their film that's unfinished. Because, you know what? If there's one truism, you can have the most learned studio executive. You could have David Zaslav. I don't know how learned he is, but he's a wise man. Take your pick. Pick a studio executive. You show that studio executive a movie, and if somebody picks up a phone that doesn't ring, they haven't put the sound effect of the phone ringing, that studio executive, Ivy League educated studio executive, will be like, you are going to put the ringing phone in when the movie's done, right? Yes. Yes, we are. We would hope that at your rarefied position, you'd understand that. Have you ever seen a movie where a phone rings or a phone doesn't ring and somebody picks it up to pretend like it did? Anyway, just saying. So I knew that there was no cut of Zack Snyder's Justice League that could ever be shown. It was not finished. And there were a lot of effects that need to be finished. And I know I am a visual effects supervisor myself. Yes, on Tango Shalom, which you can watch streaming right now on Peacock or Amazon. Yes, the movie was made for, a little more than $1 million. Still special effects there. I was the VFX supervisor and the post supervisor. So when I get pushback from people talking about, hey man, there was never a finished version of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Indeed, it ended up costing $70 million to finish, which is, you could make 6 Star Warses at $1976 for what they finished Zack Snyder's Justice League for. Where am I going with this? What does this have to do with the topic at hand? I just want to say this is a long preamble to say, I get it. So anyway, Gaurav writes me this. Hey buddy, I've been holding back far too long, dude. You guys surely are dickheads. You know that, right? From saying that Henry Cavill movies didn't make $1 billion to that DC didn't live up to expectations and blame it on Zack Snyder. Holy mother effers. Cavill and Snyder literally got one fucking movie without any problem, and it made $666 million. It started the DCEU for the first time, and in 2013, the comic book genre wasn't as popular as it is today. So your logic that Henry Cavill doesn't deserve to come back because his movie didn't make $1 billion, you son of a bitch. Iron Man 1 made around $500 million something. Why wasn't Robert Downey Jr. fired then? The Batman didn't make $1 billion. Reboot it. The Suicide Squad nuked, and you guys are hailing about James Gunn. Lamau. James Gunn has the Marvel tax. Even shit Marvel movies make 700 to 800, like Love and Thunder. Wait till he makes DC movies. Those movies will get nuked like the Suicide Squad. Secondly, Zack Snyder only got 2 fucking G movies in the theaters. Had Zack Snyder's Justice League been released in theaters in 2017, it would have made $1 billion, and Zack Snyder would still be here to this day instead of Gunn, if not for that abomination of Justice League and DC heads. BVS had 30 minutes cut from it, which made it confusing for people, and money. It made almost $900 million. It was profitable. as fuck. So the idea that movies are only successful if they break $1 billion or need to break $1 billion is bullshit. But I agree, we haven't said that. You call yourself a movie pundit. Go on to say Cavill doesn't deserve to come back because his movies didn't make money. What movie are you talking about, MFer? BVS made $900 million. Man of Steel made $666 million. Cavill got only 2 theater releases. Never call yourself a movie pundit again. You were my favorite a year or two ago, and now you're just a dickhead. Here's the thing. I appreciate you slid into my DMs and said your piece. And I appreciate your passion. I do. Now, here's the thing. And here's the thing that's really difficult for people to understand. There's a thing called return on investment. And whenever you talk about how much a movie made, how much a movie makes, well, that's one metric. But really, it's how much a movie made in relation to how much it cost. Like everything else, like every product that's ever been made and marketed and sold, you need to think about, well, how much did something cost? And then how much did it make back? Now, the conventional wisdom has always been, usually in Hollywood, that a movie must make 3 times what it cost to break even. Because what you have to remember is, if a movie cost, say, $100 and it made $300 at the box office, that's going to mean it breaks even, because remember, the studios don't get back all that box office. They get about, I don't know, maybe a little more than half. The rest of it goes to the studio and all the people involved in getting that movie out there. There is also costs that people never consider, like studio overhead, which is where they bury, when they talk about how studio accounting is so terrible. Every movie that gets made, every movie is its own business. It's usually made under its own LLC. So when a movie like Man of Steel gets made, it's not made by Warner Brothers. It's made by the Steel of Man company or whatever. You can see it at the end of the credits of whatever it was. Whatever business consortium, whatever LLC they created to make that movie. So each movie, think of a movie as a business unto itself. Every movie is its own business. And then if a studio made it, remember, studios don't have money in some magic vault underneath them where they just like, oh, we're going to dole out the cash, man. No, they have to borrow the money from a bank, which means they're making interest payments. Monthly, yearly, whatever it is, they're making interest payments, which also has to do with the profitability of a movie. So a movie like Man of Steel, Henry Cavill's Man of Steel, that I have been a staunch supporter for a long time, well, for 8 years, the movie did not make money. It made money, yes, but in regards to how much it cost, I mean, it grossed $668 million, whatever, $666 million, but that doesn't mean it was at all a profitable business venture. It was a movie that was reportedly, or the budget reportedly, was $225 million, which means it needed to make $675 million to break even, because the studios get their cut. I mean, the movie theaters get their cut. The studio overhead has to be paid for. The interest on the money borrowed to make the movie has to be paid back. That's why the conventional wisdom is no longer 3 times the budget, but 4 times the budget. And all the marketing costs. The problem with Superman was they expected it. The studios expected it to make $1 billion. That's what they wanted, because they were looking to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, $1 billion. That's what they wanted. That would have made everybody happy. It would have been nicely profitable. And remember, even if it made $1 billion, Warner Brothers, the profit might have only been for Warner Brothers $50 million, $100 million, maybe something like that. Movies are not as hugely profitable as people seem to think. But anyway, so I had somebody irate. I'm a dickhead now. I'm no longer his favorite pundit. I would ask everybody that when we are discussing, I am a Zack Snyder fan. I wanted to hate Dawn of the Dead. I didn't. I thought his 300 was an amazing evocation of that comic. I thought what he did, it wasn't really an adaptation. It was a recreation. Same with Watchmen. Not a huge, Watchmen's one of my favorite comics in the world. I thought he did a great job recreating a lot of the graphic novel. I think its weakness was it wasn't a great adaptation. It needed more adaptation. Anyway, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Zack Snyder's, and I'm a fan of Man of Steel. Here's the thing. The problem that I have with Zack Snyder's vision, and by the way, I loved Zack Snyder's Justice League. Loved it. The problem is when you're making a movie for the masses and you're dealing with Superman. Between Man of Steel, between Batman v Superman, I watched Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, and let me just say, I like it. But that movie makes me want to put a gun in my mouth and blow my brains out. As much as I enjoy it, and I like Zack Snyder's Justice League, but watching, it's Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, there is not a shred of joy in that film. It is a superhero movie about Batman and Superman. I speak those words and I'm smiling on the inside. But Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, the Ultimate Edition, whether you have a jar of piss on Holly Hunter's podium or her desk or whatever before she's blown up in an explosion, or whether it's Batman torturing people, or Batman hating Superman, or the beginning. I love the opening when Manhattan's being destroyed by, Metropolis is being destroyed by Zod. I love seeing Bruce Wayne respond. I love everything in that movie. But even I will recognize there's not a shred of joy in that film. A movie about Batman v Superman. There are 2 times you smile in that movie. And I know this because I went back and watched. Maybe you can feel warm about some of the Diane Lane scenes. I've felt warm about Diane Lane since I saw The Outsiders and especially Rumblefish. You know what I'm saying? I mean, smoking hot. A little romance. You ever see that? But anyway, so in Batman v Superman, when Wonder Woman shows up, and you hear the, that awesome Tina Guo imagine like shredding. I smile at that. She with you? No, I thought she was with you. That's a smile. But that movie is so fucking oppressive. So anyway, the reason that movie did not make what it was supposed to make is because it lacked joy. And I understand. I mean, Zack Snyder was making like the Wagner's Ring of the Nibelung superhero cycle, like Gute Dame Rung. That's what he was doing. I get it. I understand. It was awesome. But not for the masses. If you're a parent of an 8-year-old son or an 8-year-old daughter or an 8-year-old kid who loves Batman or Batman and Superman, you take into Batman v Superman or take them, they, he, she, whatever, you take that kid, that 8-year-old to that movie, not a lot of joy in there. If anything, you're going to turn that poor kid off. I'm just saying, So that's one thing. And that's, I get an opinion. Somebody's pissed at me, calls me a dickhead because I'm trying to talk about things in terms of business. I'm being dispassionate. And I would ask all of you, as fans, like when I come on and support something, like when I support what Terry Matalas has done with Star Trek Picard Season 3, which, by the way, February 16th, check it out. If you think Star Trek, modern Star Trek, like I do, is garbage and is deeply flawed, I hated Picard Seasons 1 and 2. And I love Star Trek, as you all know. Terry Matalas won me over. He won me over. The guy won me over. And he's going to win you over. You know why I know this? I know this because he won me over. And I know your skepticism. Give that man 40 minutes. You watch. If you're not interested in Star Trek Picard Season 3 after the first 40 minutes, bunk bed scene, that's all I'm going to say. If that bunk bed scene doesn't put a smile on your face, and you know what Star Trek should do? Star Trek, like Superman, Superman and Batman, got to make you smile. Star Trek makes you smile. Even when it's dark, it still puts a smile on your face. It earns that smile from you, just like Batman and Superman should. So anyway, check it out. Where am I going with all this? You're like, what, Rob? How does this? So here we are right now. We had yet another big movie open this weekend, Christmas weekend. Damien Chazelle, his 3-hour epic Babylon opened to a thud. Now here's the thing, man. I mean, I know all of you Ivy League educated business people that are running the studios. Hey, it was the same thing when I worked at Warner Brothers. I worked for Bill Young in feature production. I was one of the very first 3 management trainees at Warner Brothers beginning in 1989, September of 89. I was there 89, 90, 91, whenever, Free Willy, whatever. And even then it was the same. All the people, I had an office in the executive wing. Like, I went into Bob Daly and Terry Semmel's office every day. That's name dropping, wouldn't mean anything to anybody now, but look it up. It was impressive. I was impressed with myself. But it was, back then, it's Ivy League educated business people, because in the corporate world, you look at spreadsheets, you want to look at things, and here's how we have to hire people, because these doesn't really mean anything. But I get it. But here's the thing about Hollywood, especially the executive branch. Hollywood is it's like the Titanic. If you want to steer away from that ice cube, you can't, because it takes a long time to move things, because it's a corporate company. It's owned by shareholders, and everybody's afraid for their jobs. So there used to be mavericks, Louis B. Mayer or the people that ran the studios. They could do what they want because they started the studios, Nowadays, you can't do that. Now you're a corporately held, a corporation is a publicly held corporation. So you can't have mavericks that make these unilateral decisions. Things unfortunately don't work that way. Although David Zaslav, you have that kind of power. Warner Brothers Discovery, you can. But even David Zaslav knew what he didn't know. So before he took over, he went on that very famous if you read Variety, the 25,000 people that do, he went and talked to a bunch of people to figure out, how do I navigate this business now that I'm taking over Warner Brothers? Tough one, right? So anyway, we have all these movies. This year, we have had A-list director after A-list director with A-list casts. And their movies are failing utterly at the box office. The same way when a fan writes into me and says, Rob, this movie made money. I ask everybody to step back and let's take our punditry aside. I know we all think we know everything. Let's look at the business side of what's going on. So we now have movies that, like The Northman, Robert Eggers, who's one of the most exciting filmmakers. Robert Eggers. I mean, I loved The Witch. The Witch is terrific. He becomes the director du jour, and he gets to go make a passion project like The Northman. Now, The Northman, it reportedly cost about $90 million. It made about $60 million, a little more than that worldwide. Not a hit. David O. Russell. I've been a fan of David O. Russell's work since Three Kings. He made Amsterdam. I mean, my God, Amsterdam had Taylor Swift in it. Didn't make much money. Big bomb. Margot Robbie. I mean, if I was Margot Robbie's representation, I'd be like, yo, you were in Amsterdam, and now Babylon. Damien Chazelle. I love Damien Chazelle. I loved Whiplash. I loved La La Land. And I was a big admirer of First Man, which is his Neil Armstrong biopic. And now he's got Babylon, which to me, I have to be fair, I did see Babylon. I loved it. I thought Babylon was incredible. Love the film. It's the filmmaking tour de force, amazing film. And let's talk about where Babylon was. Babylon Let's look at Babylon. Babylon has made, again, a movie that has a reported production budget, $80-90 million. It opened in 3,343 theaters. It has made worldwide, as of now, according to Box Office Mojo, probably since yesterday, it's made $5,380,000. I mean, I'll call a spade a spade. It's a bomb. I mean, it's a huge movie that had an A-list cast, an A-list director. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than Brad Pitt or Margot Robbie. Now, there are some of you that if you go back into Brad Pitt's filmography, is Brad Pitt a movie star or is he a great actor? I love Brad Pitt. I remember first seeing him, I think the first time I recognized him was in Thelma and Louise. Star turn in that movie. I mean, in a bit role in True Romance, you gotta love the guy. Don't condescend me, man. Get some cleaning products. I mean, come on. Everybody knows that guy. So, I mean, here's the thing. Because of Henry Cavill, who I love, if you haven't seen Man from U.N.C.L.E., first of all, Man from U.N.C.L.E., based on the 60s TV series with Robert Vaughn as Napoleon Solo. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch that movie. Guy Ritchie directed it. It's so much fun. I know Armie Hammer's in it, but I promise you, he's not going to jump through the movie screen or whatever screen you're watching it on. He's not going to jump through and eat you. Just watch the movie. It's really good. And Henry Cavill's a fucking star. But anyway, be that as it may. So these films that have come out, whether it's Alexander Skarsgård in The Northman, Robert Eggers, whether it's Damien Chazelle's Babylon, Amsterdam, and of course She Said. There's been all of these movies that have come out that are made by really great filmmakers that all have really great actors in them. They're all handsomely mounted productions, and they all fucking bombed. Now, here's the thing. Even if I have a theory. Here's my theory. My theory is this. We movie fans and the movie pundit and the movie film-going community, we're a little up our own asses. And we really are. And when we're talking about these things, whether we're talking about awards, and there's a whole community, the film punditry, like there are people that I have been reading for years, people that aren't on YouTube, which I think is too bad. People like Jeffrey Wells, love or hate Jeffrey Wells. I've been reading Jeffrey Wells for 25 years. I love reading Jeffrey Wells. All of his peccadillos are for there to see. I mean, he's a great writer and he passionately loves cinema, and a lot of people hate his guts. He was very nice to me when I made a movie 25 years ago, and I even ran into him once and had dinner with him at Soup Plantation because he lived close by. But if you read people like Jeffrey Wells or Dave Poland, who I also have sold movie posters to and really like, or Sasha Stone, I think Sasha Stone, I mean, I really love her writing, and she's sexy as hell. So these are people, I know that shouldn't matter, but I'm just saying, what can I say? She does post a lot of her pictures of her boobs on Instagram. It's hard, or Facebook, hard to miss. But she's a great writer, and she's a passionate film pundit. And you read all these people, and again, I think back to like Variety. There's 25,000 people who read this, and that's it. Those people cannot make a movie a hit. Here's what is wrong. Here's my Bobby B on Christmas Day. Let me break down the knowledge for you, the knowledge. Here's what's wrong with Hollywood. Oh, I forgot. I didn't get back my point that I was going to make. So Henry Cavill. I go down a Henry Cavill rabbit hole on YouTube and start studying 40K. Now, I've had experience with Warhammer 40K for a long time. But anyway, I start watching model building. I start watching these two dudes that I love, by the way. They make great videos where they build 40K models and paint them and buy them. And I forget the name of their channel. I apologize, but you guys rule. Your videos are great. They're foreign dudes with accents. I watch their 40K videos. So I go down this rabbit hole. All of a sudden, I'm getting, like, I do watch model building. I watch a lot of model building videos. People who are, model chili, whatever. There's a lot of model building because I love spaceship models and people that build spaceship models. Aztec Dummy, Lou's channel, Aztec Dummy. He makes a lot of paint. Like if you go to Cult TV Man and go to the Cult TV Man hobby shop, Lou Dalmasso makes great vinyl paint things. So you can, if you want to paint your Star Wars ships or whatever, he makes vinyl paint things so you can paint properly and do deck lines and all that. Anyway, so I go down a rabbit hole where I watch one 40K video and the analytics suddenly like shower me with different kinds of Warhammer videos, whether it's about the lore. Let me tell you how you fix Hollywood. Hollywood does not know how to market their movies to the audience they're hoping to get to. That's it. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. All these marketing departments, they are marketing movies the way they marketed movies 10 years, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. These movies, like Babylon. Babylon is a movie about people doing blow, having elephants shit on them. They party like fucking rock stars, and they want to be movie stars in the movies. Babylon is a movie about the kids on TikTok today. It is. Babylon should have opened to $50 million. Every Gen Zer should have been going to see Babylon. And it's not because of the title. It's the fact that they didn't know what it was. Why? Because the audience that these movies need to be marketed to the way they are consuming their media today. Not like if you know a movie's coming out or you're interested in it, you might watch the trailer on YouTube. No, man. You need to see reels. You need to see Instagram video, all of that. The entirety of marketing, like you can still have I still love movie posters, so give me some cool key art. I'm into that. But movies need to change the way they can't just, people are like, well, we dropped a trailer and it got 20 million views overnight. That's people that are already looking for the trailers. Movie marketing needs to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. Build it up, ground up. You got to figure out, man, you need to show there's lots of nakedness. There's a lot of fucking going on in Babylon, which we like. We like that. You don't have to go to, Pornhub or OnlyFans or whatever you're going to. You can see it on the big screen writ large with movie stars in it. What's not to love? But the audience that you're trying to get to go doesn't know about that. They don't know anything about it. They don't know what Babylon is. Somebody will tell them, oh, there's this movie with Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie, so good as Tanya. So good as Leonardo DiCaprio's hot New Jersey girlfriend in Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, one of the most smoking hot performances ever put on screen that isn't an X-rated movie. I mean, she's amazing in that. People love Margot Robbie. And yet her movies don't do as well as they should. I mean, my God, she was in Amsterdam. Look, Amsterdam was a little bit of a lost cause. I admit that. Amsterdam and Babylon, if I were her management, I'd be a little worried. Even though they're like David O. Russell and Damien Chazelle. I mean, come on, man. Yeah, I'm just telling you. This movie has fucking and drugs and fun. And yet no one went and saw it. I mean, I would think that you got to dangle that shit to Gen Z, to your movie going. I mean, they don't even love movies anymore. Gen Z is playing video games. They're the ones on OnlyFans. They're the ones on Pornhub. But they'll go out and see a movie if they're interested, whether it's Marvel or Avatar or whatever. But with a movie like Babylon, what does that mean? Is that biblical? Is that like J. Michael Straczynski's theatrical remake of Babylon 5? No one ever thought that. But I did. Oh my God, they're making a Babylon movie? Fuck yeah. Not what you know what I'm saying. You got to market these movies in an entirely different fashion. You have to rethink how movies are marketed. Yeah, we're going to spend all this money on the Super Bowl. And look, man, you can't do that because those people, the people that are waiting to watch your trailer on the Super Bowl, they're going to go anyway. You got to change it up, man. You need to see reels. I am flipping through reels. Even I, a white cis male with one foot in the grave. You put me in front of reels, suddenly an hour and a half's gone. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. How many more Joe Rogan clips, or how many more Jordan Peterson clips, or how many more other clips am I going to watch? Or that girl, Just Say Pearl, or whatever, men's rights woman. I love her. She's great. Whatever. But, my reels are all the same stuff, and I watch. And Dave Chappelle clips. I mean, I can watch Dave Chappelle clips for 4 hours and be entertained. Why is it that between every one of those clips am I not seeing drugs and sex from Babylon? Or a clip from the movie? Why aren't I seeing that? Why aren't I seeing that? Hollywood, you need to rethink your marketing and figure out how to play those analytics and put those scenes up there. Show me the drug use in Babylon. Show me the fucking, and I'll be more interested. And you know what? These movies are dying on the vine. I mean, she said, you have a monster in court defending himself, that piece of shit defending himself. Harvey Weinstein, who I hate even more because he was a purveyor of so many great movies and started so many people's careers. That guy, and he's being skewered. He's being destroyed, as he should be. And there's no mention of that in the ad campaign. They tried, like she said, you're selling it like any Oscar bait movie for the last 20 years. Sensationalize that shit. The piece of shit this movie is about is in the courtroom right now. Go William Castle on this shit. Give me some Tingler. You got to figure out, Hollywood cannot just be about blockbuster cinema. James Cameron or Marvel, Kevin Feige. You can't just, or George Lucas or Lucasfilm. I mean, you can't just expect this to a movie like she said, handsome film, well made, but still sensationalize that shit. I mean, you've got this monster in the courtroom while that movie about him was in the theaters, and you'd never know it. Why aren't you making promos about what a monster this motherfucker is and how, I mean, it's a legitimately great film with great performances in it, and no one went and saw it. No one went and saw it. Me Too movement, whatever. I mean, Christ, man, get Andrew Tate to talk about She Said, whatever. Think out of the box. You guys are dying. Hollywood is dying on the vine because these marketing motherfuckers do not know how to market. I put on one Warhammer video about buying a Titan, and then suddenly my feed I get a deluge of Warhammer videos. I mean, you guys got to figure this shit out, man, because you got to convince people, pummel them, whether it's reels, Instagram videos, whatever. You've got to figure out how to tailor your marketing to every audience member. I know, costs more money, got to be more creative. That's your job. You went to school for that shit. And you are losing. Why did Robert Eggers' The Northman not make $100 million worldwide? That shit was dope as fuck. And you guys should watch it because it's great. It's great. And Robert Eggers, I mean, the man makes The Witch. He makes The Lighthouse. Those movies didn't cost very much money. And then the poor man puts it all out there with The Northman. If I managed your career, Robert, I would have, if you pulled it back and made it for $40 million. I know it's cold. I understand. I love you, buddy. And I think that The Witch, by the way, The Witch, if you horror filmmakers want to watch a movie and learn how to create atmosphere, The Witch, man. And what movies made a lot of money? Smile. Shout out to Paramount. Smile, $17 million spend, $200 million. Give it up for Roy Lee. Roy Lee, the man who was smart enough to look at Asian horror 20 years ago and go, hey, there's something here. Got the rights to the Lego movie, man. You know why he got the rights? Because he was playing the video game and he thought to himself, this is compelling storytelling and characters. If you can make a game out of this, you could make a movie out of this. He goes and he gets the rights. That's smart movie making. He knew what was up. And that's what we need more of in Hollywood. No more of this, if you want to make money in this business and you don't have James Cameron to fall back on, or you don't have Kevin Feige to fall back on, we need maverick thinkers. Because you know what? How is it that a studio spends $90 million on a Damien Chazelle movie that has copious amounts of sex and drug use and nudity and awesomeness and fun? Babylon is fucking fun to watch, and no one's going to see it. They're not going to see it because it was a failure of marketing, because the very audience that would embrace it and love it probably want to cancel it too, but that's part of it. Lean into that. They didn't know it was out there. They didn't know the joys that movie would give them. Why? Because the marketing fucking sucked. You wouldn't know it. Lean into what it is. No, we're going to hide it. Man, Hollywood marketing, you got so much power and you are failing some of our great filmmakers. Now, admittedly, David O. Russell's Amsterdam, not great. It was no Silver Linings Playbook. I get it. But it should have made more money than it did. And the thing is, whether you still made the movie, the studios need to get more creative with their marketing. They need to figure it out. No more should your Ivy League business degrees or marketing degrees. You shouldn't get a pass. You have failed too often. And this year has been a constant failure of marketing. It's been a constant failure. You guys are making this product, and a lot of it's great. These are not terrible movies that are failing. These are hot topic, hot button, interesting, fun films. The Northman, Babylon. She said, might be a little, I get it, but triggering. Go after that. Lean into that. Why don't you do that? I would. Anyway. That's basically what I wanted to say about this movie. But my God, there's a lot of people here who have lots of things to say. And I'm looking at wait a minute. I'm looking at all of this. Wait, people have sent in a bunch of super chats, and I only see one. I don't know why that is. And this James Lockman, who sent it to the last super chat, said, Meli Kaliki Makarab, hope you're having a wonderful day. What hot toys do you have coming in the new year? Oh my God. I have so many hot toys. I can't even begin to, you know what I really want? I really want Anthony Mackie's Captain America with the wings. There's Star Trek figures. There's so much coming. But anyway, I'm going to go, but that's I've kind of held off on, I'm not a big fan anymore of pre-orders because waiting is so long. I can do other things for the movies or for the figures. And it just seems like, anyway, I'm going to see if I can go back and capture and find out why all these super chats have disappeared from me. And there's been a lot of them. And I don't understand why. But anyway, let me go look here. There's a couple of tips that have come in. Let me start with the tips. Stubble McShave sends in a tip and says, I saw Fanny and Alexander. It airs every Christmas day here. I like it, but I suspect many wouldn't sit through the 3-hour runtime. It shows the happiness of a creative home versus the stifling oppression of a dominant religious father. It mirrors Bergman's own childhood. I love Fanny Alexander, and I'm a huge Bergman fan. Stubble goes on to say, I get people are pissed Gunn and Safran are rebooting DC, but they're trying to build a substantial DC, and they need a solid foundation. That means solid steel beams have to be cleared away with the rubble. By the way, Gunn and Safran sound like superhero alter ego names. Listen, I agree. Like I'm a huge fan of what they're doing, and it's not all these people that want. I mean, first of all, Zack Snyder himself has moved on. He's doing Rebel Moon movies. We're getting something brand new from him, his own mythology. And the fact is, look, as much as I like his movies, they lack joy. They do not put a smile on your face. Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice starts with Metropolis being leveled, and then it ends with Superman dead. And there isn't, you show kids that movie, there's not a lot of joy to be had in that film. So But anyway, so I agree with you. And also, Bergman, Fanny Alexander is a wonderful movie. People should check it out. You should check it out. It's good. Our own Roberto Suarez says, "Thank you for giving Alex and I." Wow, Roberto, that's very nice. He sends in a tip, a $25 tip. "Thank you for giving Alex and I the opportunity to do the Spanish show and for your years of support and friendship. A Merry Christmas and a happy 8th night of Hanukkah to you and Elizabeth." The final night of Hanukkah is on Christmas Day. How cool is that? Well, Roberto, that's very kind of you. For those of you who don't know, the Alex Montano, who also was a warrior, he had a health crisis and survived it. And Roberto Suarez have started a new show on this channel called Que Pasa PGS, and it is it's in Spanish. Yeah, and it's great. And you can watch it subtitled, and they're doing a great job. I'm really excited. I hope I can figure out a way, and if you have any, I don't have a marketing executive, but if I could figure out a way to market it to the Latino community, whether it's, anywhere in Central America. I know in Brazil, it's Portuguese. They speak Portuguese, but it'd be great to get more eyeballs on it, because it's a great show. It's a great show. And I appreciate what they're doing. Richard says, "Have you seen the recent Star Trek Prodigy episodes? We've come a long way from New Trek trying to be desperately different. Prodigy replicates everything, brings back all the ships, uniforms, and even the bridges. The outrageous Akona is even there. Billy Campbell himself. Hey, credit where credit is due. Star Trek Prodigy this season has been doing some great stuff. I've really enjoyed it. My only caveat there is that it's animated, so it's not real. Star Trek has to be real, and it has to be live action. But all kidding aside, Star Trek Prodigy is pretty damn good. And I'll tell you one thing. Star Trek Prodigy is light years ahead of Star Trek Discovery and Picard seasons 1 and 2. Thank God for Terry Matalas and Picard season 3. I'm still going to figure out, if you sent in earlier super chats, I'm still figuring out where they went. I don't know why they have not shown up on my viewer activity here. They've all disappeared. But I'm going to find them. Don't worry. Don't you worry. I'm going to find them on this show. Cash sends in a super chat and says, "Merry Christmas to everybody. What was the most memorable moment in movies for you this year, Rob?" Mine is the shot of the rain on the house in Nope. That shot in IMAX felt surreal and unforgettable. That's a really great question. This is such a weird thing to say, because there's a lot of really interesting moments in movies this year. But I have to say this. I think a movie moment I did not expect to see was in Top Gun Maverick. And it was the scene with Val Kilmer and Tom Cruise, especially after watching the documentary on Val Kilmer. I was, this year, Real Genius came out on 4K Blu-ray. I love Val Kilmer as a performer. I know he has a reputation and all that, but I've always loved him. I thought he was terrific in The Doors. I loved him in Real Genius. I loved him in Top Secret. I'm a huge Val Kilmer fan. And I didn't know if he was going to be. There was conflicting reports. And it wasn't until I was at CinemaCon this year in Celine Dion's theater at the Caesars Palace, watching Top Gun Maverick on screens that were installed for the event by Dolby themselves. And I was very moved. I have to say, I shed a tear in that scene with Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer. And, shout out to Tom Cruise for putting Val in the film. And Val looked great, and yet they worked his own real life infirmity into the film in a beautiful manner. And I thought what they did was great. And that's something that really stuck with me. Gil Bell, Cardinal Sin himself, says, "Merry Christmas, Laser Bob." Well, Merry Christmas to you, Gil. And I still have that House of the Dead stuff. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about it. Still got it. Going to get it signed for you. Glenn Mark, all the way down from New Zealand, says, so Rob, William Shatner guest starred in Lucy Lawless's lead New Zealand-Australian production, My Life is Murder. If you blink, though, you'll miss his name credit. I did not know that. Shatner guest starred in a New Zealand. It doesn't surprise me. Shatner is doing so much stuff. Tom Jr. Jackson said, hey, Rob. Tom Jr. Jackson, who's a moderator here around these parts. And I want to say thank you for everything you do, Tom. He coined the phrase, we're all goof people. Tom says, hey, Rob, Merry Christmas to you and Elizabeth. Sent you a DM the other day. Check it when you get the chance. Watched Double Indemnity last night again. Double Indemnity, we had a 4K of that put out by the Criterion organization. The Criterion Collection put that out on disc this year. Double Indemnity, in my mind, is like the Star Wars of 40s film noir. It's so much was... It influenced so many movies. By the way, in the Star Trekkin' in the live chat says The Menu probably was the underdog of the year. It made not bad money for its production. I agree. You know, The Menu had, I think it really benefited because of the subject matter itself. You had the whole foodie component, and there's so many foods, so many food shows now that I think it was able to kind of sail by on that. And it had subject matter that helped it, I think, in the marketplace. And The Menu is cool. Jordan Saylor says, I also think when you have a streaming movie level entertainment at home, I find it's too expensive to see a movie at the theater. We end up paying close to $100 for popcorn and drinks. Definitely a very good point to make. A very good point to make. And people need to know. Look, I would say this. I would say that Babylon is an experience. It's definitely something you should experience in the theater with an audience. Of course, there's probably going to be no audience in the theater when you go see it. Between a bomb cyclone and what's going on in a lot of the country, hope everyone is keeping safe out there. But you know, you might be right about that. David Gonzalez says, I want 30 minutes of commercials to play at movie premieres. Bet it will change after that real quick. Personally, I would pay extra for them to stop. Let me tell you something. The worst experience I had in a movie theater was the half an hour we spent in the theater waiting for Avatar 2, The Way of Water to start. We were at Regal Cinemas, and we were watching commercials in an IMAX screen on an IMAX sound system. It was so loud, it bordered on abuse. Because here's the thing, commercials are mixed higher anyway. They're louder. It was a crime. It was a crime against everybody sitting in that theater. It should never have happened. Do not play commercials before your IMAX screenings. You're paying more money. You should make it the premiere experience that it should be. And I hated it. It's bad. Not good. Let's see if I hope I don't get your name wrong. Runak Mahato, and thank you for generously supporting the channel that way. Rajamouli has won the Best Director Award at New York and LA Film Critics Circles. Hope he gets recognized at the Oscars too. You should watch his or Iga on Netflix. A man reincarnates as a fly and decides to take revenge on his killer. Well, S.S. Rajamouli had a great year. He directed the film RRR, which I recommend a lot of you. You should all watch it. But here's the thing. I am always banging on about verisimilitude. Always. You know, that's what creating verisimilitude is, to my mind, the hardest thing to do in movies. And I really admire it. On the other hand, there is such a thing as anti-verisimilitude. And when it is done in a fashion that I enjoy, I think it can work really well. Michael Davis played a lot with anti-verisimilitude in his movie Shoot 'Em Up. RRR is I would say also John Woo movies. As much as I love like The Killer and Bullet in the Head and Hard Boiled, he plays with and movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. There's a certain element of anti-verisimilitude in Chinese cinema, Chinese wuxia cinema, and also hard-boiled triad movies. And I would say RRR is anti-verisimilitude. Now, knowing that going in, if it's something that you can appreciate, I think you'll love it because RRR is so much fun. Now, I haven't seen, people keep telling me to watch this movie Iga on Netflix, which I haven't seen yet, but there's a lot of people that reject. I talked about Jeffrey Wells earlier. He hated RRR, and I understand why he rejected it. Hated it. And, I don't begrudge him for that, but there's a lot of people that it's not their bag, and I get it. However, if you will buy into it, if you take your verisimilitude blinders off, and I have to do that, but I tend to adjust my expectations for different things. RRR is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Not for everybody, but a lot of fun. La Ligue, let's see. La Ligue des Nakamas. I mean, I'm sure I didn't say that correctly. But one of two. Interesting asks, if the next Superman movie introduces Parasite, what kind of story would you enjoy considering his powers? I'd do a story of trust between Metropolis and Superman in which the people would have to resist a tyrannical parasite with Superman's powers while the hero everyone believed to be dead must work to regain his powers with Hamilton. I think that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. Now, for those who don't know, and I want to make sure I get all this correctly. So, Parasite, according to, is the most the most recurring parasite is Rudy Jones, who is a main adversary of Superman and belongs to the collective of enemies that make up his rogues gallery. Each version of the character has the ability to temporarily absorb the life energy, superpowers, and knowledge of others. Parasite was ranked number 61st as the greatest comic book villain of all time by IGN. Well, here's the thing. What I like about your idea is, like, for me, I love the idea of pretenders to the throne, villains who pretend they're heroes, and they end up discrediting a hero, and the hero has to come back and fight his way. Moon Knight 25 was like that. And after Superman Returns came out, I pitched an idea to Bryan Singer, which was, it was very much detailed, but it was all about an AI that was in charge of the 28 known galaxies, all the information that was stored on Krypton. He was like the curator, the librarian of all of the information. He was an AI, an anthropomorphic AI, kind of like I imagined him looking like the AIs at the end of Spielberg's AI. And he was able to escape Krypton in a ship with all of the Kryptonian knowledge. And what he's been trying to do is figure out a way to become alive. And he basically travels to planets, gets everything from them, anything that he can learn, and then eliminates those planets as leaves them as desiccated hulks of themselves. And he's traveling around the universe, and he finds New Krypton, which is created at the end of Superman Returns. It's acting like a lighthouse, brings him to Earth, and he becomes Earth's savior because he doesn't have no one ever told him to not interfere in human behavior, or human evolution, or human life. He comes to Earth and immediately starts making it in his own image, and what he wants to do is usurp Superman's son and transfer his essence into that body because he wants to be alive. And he discredits Superman and changes the world, cures cancer and all that, and everyone loves him, and they hate Superman. And then, of course, they have to battle it out. And goes from there. So I like that Parasite story. I think it's a good idea. Our friend Alexander Wilson says, Rob, how are you doing? Doing all right. Since interest rates are going above 5% in 2023, the highest since 2007, how will that affect movie budgets in the future? Oh, it's a huge impact on movie budgets. Interest rates, because here's the thing, when studios borrow money, the product that they're going to make, that they're borrowing the money on, doesn't even get made and put out in theaters till 2 years. So you've got 2 years of interest payments that you're making depending on the deals. I would imagine studios have been doing this for such a long period of time that they have lower interest rates. Maybe not, but I would say that interest rate hikes don't necessarily affect the studios the way we might think. Again, I don't know that for a fact. I've never had anybody tell me that, but I would imagine that if they're going to borrow that much money, they're not a high risk investment because the banks know they're going to get their money back even if a movie totally tanks. Because, by the way, that's another thing people never take into account in terms of movie budgets. The studios have to also figure out, and whatever the creative accounting is, if one movie bombs, they have to make it up with other films. So there's all that. That's where all the creative accounting comes in, and that's something people need to remember. Alexander Wilson goes on to say, the worst experience in a movie theater was when I went to a Regal to see Doctor Strange 2, and they double booked the theater room by accident. And I had to start the movie an hour and a half after the original time. An hour after the original time. Well, that sucks. I'm sorry that they did that to you. That's really lame. That isn't good. I don't like that they did that to you. That is not great. So listen, let me ask you people who were generous enough to send me super chats. I would encourage all of you, if I have not read your super chat yet, I don't know, sometimes this happens, why they disappeared for me to see before I started addressing them. So if you could go to Twitter and go to Burnett RM and send me your super chats, what you had said to me, I'll read them. So go to Twitter, go to Burnett, BURNETTRM, and go into my DMs and send me your super chats, resend me your super chats. I will read them on the show. Again, I profusely apologize. I don't know why they all disappeared. James Lockman was the first one I read, and that I knew I got a bunch before that, which is lame. And I don't know why that happened. So I apologize. Now, as you know, I read letters on this show, and I have a few letters. I'd like to read some. Jared Snyder wrote in a letter. By the way, you can go right down below, postgeeksingularity.com, go to my website, and you can send me letters. Jared Snyder writes, what does in development mean? Dear Rob, could you take a few minutes and explain what it means when a film or a project is in development? Based on your prior comments, I am assuming that the studio will set up a fiscal entity of some kind and with some executive manager who assumes oversight of the project. And then what happens next for in development? Is it about hiring writers or a director or a producer or securing intellectual property or some combination? I am sure there are many variations on this, but what does happen? When a person is connected with in development, does that mean they are pulling a salary or are being paid a stipend or piecework? Are we still in development when a script is being written or a visual artist is hired to develop key art? Thanks, as always, Jared M. Snyder. That is a very, very good question. Now, when something is in development, and I'm talking about in active development, it means that, yes, a studio has done something like if they acquire a novel, for instance. I would assume that at some point when they buy the novel, the studio is acquiring the novel, the rights, because there is no entity yet where, I guess it really depends how I've really thought about it this way, but they have yet to create an LLC or an opposite entity, because a studio would have a certain amount of money. They have a certain development budget, so they could acquire books and theoretically books, comics, articles, TV shows, whatever it is that they want to acquire, or if they decide that they're going to develop, say, Warner Brothers, like a whatchamacallit, like The Man from U.N.C.L.E., acquire a TV show, or Dukes of Hazzard or something. So when something is in development, there is money usually being spent on that property. So if they decide they're going to make a Dukes of Hazzard movie, the studio then might find a writer, and they will pay that writer. Now, as far as I understand, and I admittedly, this is not a subject of expertise for me, I don't think they start its own entity, a production entity like the Dukes of Hazzard LLC, until they decided to pull the trigger or green lit the movie. So what happens is they spend development money, and there are executives at the studio that work with a writer. They will write multiple drafts of the studio. That writer is, in fact, getting paid. And they probably have what's called a step deal, meaning they get paid for a treatment. You know, they'll write a treatment, which is sort of like it's kind of an outline, but it's a more detailed outline that fleshes out the story. Say a treatment's, 20 pages. And they write a treatment. And it's a step deal defined by, because the studio is a WJ signatory, which means in doing this, they have to follow the rules as laid out by the Writers Guild of America, the union. So they have to pay a certain amount of money for a treatment, and they might have to do 2 different versions of the treatment, and then it's a step deal. They get paid as they go. If they decide to pull the trigger on a draft, they get paid for a draft. And then they might have to get paid depending on their deal or whatever they're going to make, what their agent can get for them. Through each step of the way, they write a first draft. And after the first draft, if the studio likes it and retains the writer, then they have to do other drafts, and it's a step deal. And then once they get the script to a place where they want to make this movie, they're like, okay, we are ready to move. They will then look for a director, stars. And then stars, they might bring on a star that wants the script changed, wants to make changes or whatever. And when everybody's in agreement that the movie that they want to make, the movie that's been written, the movie that exists, and you've got stars and you have a director and all the principal above the line talent for the most part attached, mostly it's the actors and the director or whatever, the studio will then green light the movie. And by the way, this is a gross oversimplification of all of it. But then they start an entity. When they green light the movie, that means the money starts to flow. And they go make that movie. And they set up their own LLC, an entity. Again, an oversimplification, but that's basically what happens. SVS Guru 2000 says, about Picard Season 3, you said that Season 3 is great. I looked up the writers of Season 3, and they're the same as previous seasons. How much are they to blame for the awfulness of Seasons 1 and 2 versus them being forced to write crap by the showrunners? Listen, with television, the showrunners have to take full responsibility. And the fact is, the showrunners have the vision. And yeah, Terry Matalas wrote on Season 2, but he was the showrunner of Picard Season 3. And when you see it, aside from certain links they had to deal with, because it is the 3rd season, nothing in Picard Season 3, from the way it looks, there aren't opening credits like they had. The opening credits come at the end. It looks and feels like an entirely different show. Yes, it's still Picard Season 3. So there are links, especially Laris. The first time you see Patrick Stewart and Captain Picard in Chateau Picard is with Laris. That's after the cold open of the show. But for the most part, it's an entirely different show because Terry Matalas was not the showrunner. He was not able to do what he wanted. And Star Trek Picard Season 3, you have a very strong showrunner in Terry Matalas who, what happened? Here's the thing. What happens is you have to have an overall vision in television so you understand where you're going. In Star Trek Picard Seasons 1 and 2, they didn't. They didn't know where they were going. There's a lot of making it up as we go. They had to, from what I understand, for Star Trek Picard Season 3, Terry was in there, shaped the story, and they had to write it relatively quickly because they went right from Season 2 into Season 3. But Terry was calling all the shots and making it his own. He had a very strong vision of what he wanted to do. And as you've seen, if you follow him on Twitter, posting music, he talked about working with his composer, even the composer he'd had previously worked with on the 12 Monkeys show. So that's why a real strong showrunner is vital in television. So, yeah. La Lagune des Nakamas says, I'm sorry, I'm killing your name. I hope you won't say that Superman has no threat to face in Metropolis anymore. When I think of his metahuman enemies, it hurts to hear that. Well, here's the thing. And here's what I would say about Superman. Any fan of the comics knows that there's any number of foes in Superman's rogues gallery he can face, from Mongol to Mixoplitic. The question is, how do you make many of his foes, like Metallo, how do you make that foe believable in a movie that people want to see? That's the hard part. There's an endless number of people he can fight. But how do you make it believable in the context of a superhero movie that we're used to seeing today? That's the hard part. How do you make Brainiac a believable villain? How do you do that? I mean, there's lots of ways to do that. How do you make Mongol, if you're going to go to, Warworld or whatever? How do you do that? And how do you, I don't know if you can do Mongol anymore. It'd be too, it's like Thanos. But how do you make it real? How do you make it believable? And that's a tough thing to do. Hard to do that. Let's see. This one comes from Vincent. Oh wait, that's for Let's Get Physical Media. I won't do that. And that's to Midnight Musings. I can't read that either. Here's a good one. Matthew Seeley writes, an apology and a question about Avatar: The Way of Water. Hey, Rob, I wanted to apologize regarding a Twitter fight we had over the Obi-Wan Kenobi show a while back. I let my own personal feelings get in the way of you expressing your opinion when I should have respectfully agreed to disagree. And for that, I apologize. Still a big fan of yours. That's very nice, Matthew. Thank you. Second thing I want to mention or ask is regarding the box office for Avatar: The Way of Water. Do you think the 134 million opening is worrisome, or is this going to be a slow burn hit like the original? I'm hoping for the latter, as I love the first and second movies and genuinely want more. Well, good question, Matthew. First of all, no. 95% of Avatar 3 and the first 20 minutes or so of Avatar 4 have already been shot. They're already in the can. And the reason is, as James Cameron explained, he wanted the kids to not age like they aged in, say, Stranger Things. He shot everything with the kids, and as he said in many interviews, then there's a 6-year jump ahead in Avatar 4, wherever that's going to be. So I think we're going to get it. And they're committed. We're at least going to get Avatar 3 and 4, I would imagine. Remember, both Titanic and the first Avatar took a long time for them to earn out. They were not big. We're so used to hearing about these monster grosses. But if you look at Top Gun Maverick, which I would look at Top Gun Maverick and Avatar: The Way of Water in a similar fashion. Top Gun Maverick played for a long time. I think people are going to go back to see Avatar because it is an experience. It is an experience to see in the theater, and I think people know that. It's had a good hold, and it's done well at the box office. So, yeah, I would imagine I don't know if it's going to make $3 billion, but I think it's providing people an experience that they can't necessarily get elsewhere. And that's kind of what James Cameron has sort of always done, which I think is a good thing. You know, you kind of gotta love that with him. Let me go check and see. A great letter, though, by the way, and I want to thank you, Matthew, for writing it in. Hey, if we get on in Twitter fights, it's fine. We're not getting in fist fights in real life, so that's okay. This one comes from Joe, and it's about the members-only chat. Joe says, hey, Rob, big fan for a long time. I'm eager to join the members-only chat, but I'm slightly anxious as I've never Zoomed or streamed before and I don't know much about it. Nevertheless, I have a good mic and a camera, so if possible, I would like to join in the fun. The only problem is how to do it. Any insight would be much appreciated because, as I said, I'm a bit trepidatious as at the moment due to my embarrassing lack of knowledge in the matter. Cheers, Joe. Well, Joe, first of all, thank you. As people know, if you want to become a member of this channel, we have bi-weekly member chats, so we'll have one next week where I hang out with you guys. I mean, they sometimes have gone up to 5 hours long where we hang out and chat. But you can do it based on I put out a link for members and you get it and you just click on the link. You just have to make sure that your camera and it is through Zoom. So you have to have this Zoom software, but you just go through Zoom and it's really easy. But Zoom is not free. So you do have to pay for it. I know it's a pain in the ass, but we go through Zoom. You just click on it and you might want to just try it before. But that's all you need. If you've got a mic and a camera, then we can chat. We can chat, Joe. So hope to see you. Next weekend, we'll have another member chat, which is good. Let's see. This is an interesting question. Nathan K. Subject says, what does it actually mean to be human? Hey, Rob, I remember a while back you were talking about the movie Blade Runner and the philosophical implications of the film. I remember your big takeaway from the film as being that the film poses the question, can a robot/android have a soul? I've been waiting to write back with my thoughts about the philosophical meaning of the film. While I don't disagree with your takeaway, I prefer to look at Blade Runner's core idea as something that is even simpler and yet much more profound. Well, this is just so you know, I mean, movies are about a lot of different things. I'm just saying that was one of the big ones. What I take away is this. When you can create an artificial being that looks human and behaves like a human to such an extent that most people who interact with it wouldn't know it was a robot, what does it mean to actually be human? Let that sink in for a second. The reason that I decided to write this letter to you now is because I've been working my way through Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I recently watched the episode The Measure of a Man. That's from the second season, written by Melinda Snodgrass, which really explores this specific topic. In this episode, Data is being ordered to surrender himself, to be dismantled for the sake of research, but he doesn't want to go along with it, and neither does Picard. Then the episode goes to a Starfleet hearing where they literally have the debate about whether Data, who is an android, is a person or property. I love the character of Data, and I love this episode. During the arguments, they bring up several points I had thought about on my own, but there were more points raised that had never occurred to me. One thing I wish that they did do in the episode is for them to get testimonies from the various crew members of the Enterprise to see which of them had to say on the matter. To see what each of them had to say on the matter. I also wished that they had used the message that Tasha Yar had recorded for Data as evidence. In it, she talked about how Data sees things with the wonder of a child, and that makes him more human than any of us. I do see Data as a person. If you watch the show and become emotionally invested in the characters, how could you not see him as a person? I wasn't planning on writing in about Star Trek since I'm not so very far into the franchise, but after seeing this episode recently, I felt compelled to do so. I just wanted to share my thoughts on this topic. Nathan K. Well, Nathan, what a great letter you have written. Okay. You've brought up many different philosophical questions about life. Here's what I would say about Data. And when Picard points to Data, that the premise of Star Trek is to seek out new life and new civilizations. And Picard points to Data and says, new life. Well, there it sits. I think Data, sentient android, is a new form of life. I think that when it comes to Blade Runner And I think the question that remains unaddressed even in your letter is one of the things that makes us human is the fact that our lives are finite, that we are creatures that are born and in being born know that our lives are going to come to an end. And what makes us human is the fact that our lives are in fact finite. Now, an android like Data could presumably live forever with a power source without being destroyed. So the idea of a finite lifespan is not something that Data would ever have to necessarily contend with. Essentially, he could be immortal. And I think just for the human life form, the fleeting nature of our existence is part of what makes us human. Our entire lives are defined by the knowledge that our lives will one day come to an end. And ultimately, depending on whether you're a philosopher or whatever, that our lives will never be able to accomplish as much. I mean, some people certainly, I think, are satisfied in their lives. I mean, you can be a great parent and raise a family of people that you're very proud of, that could be enough. But I think all of us, and we see this in Roy Batty, everybody wants more life. And the replicants in Blade Runner know that their lifespan has been severely curtailed, 4-year lifespan. And they want more life. And if you, depending on which version of Blade Runner you see, it's either I want more life father or I want more life fucker, which I actually think is pretty interesting. The different versions of Blade Runner that exist in that conversation with Eldon Terrell have two different meanings, but they kind of both, they're different sides of the same coin. And I think that's what makes that movie so compelling. But I think the nature of what makes us human is our finite lifespan. And the thing about Data is he is a sentient android that is a sovereign individual. And I think that that's incredibly important. And that's what they were arguing. And I think that we're not as... we're not, obviously, human beings are not as progressive as we really want to be. And I think one of the great things about science fiction and speculative fiction in any way, shape, or form is that so often authors can delve into these issues without fear of reprisal. Like right now, you can't even muse about certain issues without somebody coming after you and canceling you. But in science fiction, you can, because that's what speculative fiction is all about. I mean, whether you read Ursula K. Le Guin's The Left Hand of Darkness, and there's a great deal of gender issues brought up in that book. No one's going to come after her and scream and yell about what she was trying to say in that novel, because the whole point of it is that, it's presenting something that isn't real necessarily, but that's what great science fiction does. You can delve into the issues of the day, the very human issues in the context of science fiction, and it doesn't have to be political and people don't have to get really angry. You can contemplate both sides of the issue because it is a work of science fiction. That's what like the Twilight Zone did so well. Star Trek, the original Star Trek, allegorical action adventure, science fiction. You can deal with things that without people getting political about them because it's in the context of a futuristic science fiction show. So let's talk about the issues. And what's great is you between Blade Runner and The Measure of a Man, those are two great. For those of you who don't know, The Measure of a Man is a second season Next Generation episode written by Melinda Snodgrass. And what's really interesting about that for me personally, if I can toot my own horn, is when I was working on the Blu-rays of Star Trek The Next Generation with Roger Leigh Jr. doing all the special features, because of the foresight of Mike and Denise Akuda, they had sent Melinda Snodgrass, the writer, a VHS cassette of a longer version of that episode. There was a long version. It was 13 minutes longer than the original version. And they just had to cut it because it was very verbose. They had to cut it for time. So when we were prepping the special features, the suggestion was made that, let's contact Melinda Snodgrass and see if she has this 25-year-old VHS cassette. We can put that on the season 2 set. Well, when I was in New York interviewing Patrick Stewart for those special features, I said to Ken Ross in his office, I'm like, bro, we got the negative. Why don't we reconstruct that VHS tape in 2K? We're restoring the negative. Let's make that a reality. And Ken Ross, because he is Big Daddy Ken, like we like to talk to him, or like to talk of him, he is one of the great home video executives of all time. The fact that CBS put him out to pasture was a crime against entertainment. But he started working with people like Andre Blay, who founded Magnetic Video, which later became 20th Century Fox Home Entertainment, CBS Home Entertainment, back in the day. So Ken Ross, Big Daddy Ken, goes all the way back to the dawn of home entertainment. And he, when I said this in his office, he'd watch me interview Patrick Stewart. He was impressed enough with me that he hadn't seen me really do work like that. And I brought this up to him, and he said, absolutely, we should do that. And they did. So if you get, and by the way, the first time it ever screened, we did 3 events with Fathom where we showed 2 of the remastered episodes theatrically, and then I did cut downs of my documentaries that also played at the event, which was great. That I don't think anyone has ever had their DVD or Blu-ray documentaries play theatrically, but my work did, which is pretty spectacular. So for the season 2 Fathom event, we showed that extended Measure of Man episode. So it had its world premiere in a movie theater, which was dope as fuck. I mean, that was so awesome. And it also played, for those of you who want to know, the other episode it played with was Q Who, directed by Rob Bowman, and that was the first episode that featured the Borg. So if you want to have an interesting contemplative examination, I mean, I would suggest watching Blade Runner 2049, and watching the Next Generation episode, The Measure of Man. And if you have the Blu-rays, watch the extended version, because it is the only extended version of a Star Trek episode, and it's very interesting. You can see a fencing scene between Riker and Picard. That's pretty neat. So, interesting, Nathan. I very much appreciated that letter. So, thank you for that. This next letter comes to us, another letter. I'm going to save this letter. I'm going to save this one too. These are all for, I get letters for our different shows. Wow. I guess all the other letters I've got are from different shows. Nope. This one comes from Marty Vance. Marty Vance says, "Hey, Rob, it may be way too early to ask this, but I think it would be a good topic to hear your speculation about. DC has 4 films coming out next year to wind down the DCEU. Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which opens on March 17th, The Flash on June 16th, Blue Beetle on August 18th, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom on Christmas Day. With San Diego Comic-Con happening July, smack dab between The Flash and Blue Beetle, what do you think DC will do there? James Gunn and Peter Safran will surely have announced some details about the new DC universe by then, but will they do a big rollout at next year's Comic-Con or wait until 2024? If they don't wait, how might they balance kicking off the new DC universe without obliterating excitement for the final 2 films?" Here's the thing. I think people should be just as excited about Blue Beetle and Aquaman the Lost Kingdom as any movie they could possibly see, because they're movies unto themselves. I loved the first Aquaman. It was a hoot. I loved it. It made me feel like I was 8 years old watching Jason and the Argonauts for the first time. I loved it. I'm really looking forward to Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. I don't care if there's going to be no DC EU to support it. I'm going to see it. I love the dope blue suit. You know, I love James Wan as a director, and I think absolutely you've got to go see the movie, and Blue Beetle too. Here's what I think. I think what we're going to get James Gunn, because remember, he's got Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 coming out in May. We're going to have James Gunn and Peter Safran probably bringing the first cast members of whatever the hell movie they're going to make first. I would imagine Superman and Batman. If I was a betting man, I would say that Ben Affleck, his movie is going to be announced, and hopefully it'll be a Batman movie. Hopefully his Batman script with Deathstroke the Terminator, because what better way to introduce a new Batman than that? and whatever the Superman movie is going to be, and we're going to meet the cast. And I also think we're also going to get huge presentations about Aquaman and Blue Beetle. And they're going to talk about all that stuff. That's what I think. I think that's what we're going to get. And I think it's going to be epic and fun, and everybody's going to get very excited about it. So that's I don't know if that's true. I mean, we'll definitely get that for sure. By the way, so James Lockman said, I sent in a $20 tip. I don't know if it disappeared. I just stated that some of the best things I watched this year were Arcane, Andor, Bullet Train, Glass Onion, Top Gun, Maverick, The Northman, Batman, and Avatar 2. Well, James, first of all, thank you for sending that in. I appreciate you sending me that. Very much appreciate it. So that's good. Let's see. Nada the Sailor says, dude, check out the Hawkeye 1984 deleted scene. You will love it. I will. I didn't know that they had that. I didn't know that. So, that's amazing. And let's see. I think I've got everybody who wrote in about that. The Road to Liberty said, I sent in 2 Streamlabs messages as Richard after the Star Trek Prodigy one. Are they still there? Probably. I would imagine they are. Let me check and see. Yes. I haven't got that far yet because there's more, but Richard, yes. Then Anonymous sends in a tip and says, Happy Hanukkah, Rob. Look on the bright side, Rob. Us Jews had the last laugh on those Roman assholes. Well, can't argue with you there. That's absolutely true. Superhero Displays, my friend. How are you? You of the Thor Ragnarok figure. Merry Xmas, happy holidays to the family and the Post-Geek Singularity. It happened to me today with the Empire Strikes Back Luke Snowspeeder 2.0. Y'all ever walk into a shop and a figure you want and rush to get it and then see it real life and then you had to have it? Okay, so what you're saying is you saw the Snowspeeder pilot Luke and you had to buy it. I'm right there with you, buddy. I am right there with you. I have to say, I'm going to talk about this a little later, but I made quite the acquisition of third-party X-Men 6-scale figures and an Age of Ultron Scarlet Witch. But I'm going to talk about that later, not now. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, some of the great things I watched this year. Oh, I got that one. Arcane, Top Gun Maverick. I just read that. So thank you. And Richard goes on to say, regarding those movies, Rob, isn't it just that we've been trained to not go to the theater anymore? COVID conditioned us to see $200 million soap operas, which I think is the Marvel formula, and it leads us to not even consider those kinds of films. Richard, you know what? That's a really good point to make. So what Richard is saying is that in our post-COVID world, haven't we been conditioned to not going to see movies like She Said, or movies like Babylon, or even Amsterdam in the theater? Yes. And that is where the marketing departments of Hollywood need to step up their game. They can no longer market movies the way they marketed movies 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years ago. They need to use all of the tools at their disposal to get people to go see films. And unfortunately, that's a hard thing to do. So I would say they need to work harder at doing what they do. Absolutely need to work harder. Because they have to tell people why they need to go see these movies. That's what movie marketing is all about. But yeah, they have to overcome the fact that we didn't go to theaters, and that if you're going to go to theaters, we'll go out for Way of Water or some epic Marvel film. But you know what? I believe all movies, it's better to see all movies in a theater, to have a theatrical experience with them. And if they do well in the theaters, those movies are added, they have added value in the streaming world as well. So, Stubble McShave again says, I suspect that Avatar will have a huge drop domestically this weekend due to the weather. Well, it's making almost $100 million this weekend, which is too bad since it's a big movie weekend. It will probably mean that we'll increase its box office next weekend. I think that Avatar is going to continue to play through the week. And, it's interesting. Let's find out. What is Avatar, The Way of Water's box office right now? Let's see. Let's see. I'm looking. Ooh, that Wolverine. Hugh Jackman teases that Wolverine and Deadpool hate each other in the new film. I love that. That's cool. Again, I'm going through the stories of all this to find out where are we at box office wise. Here we go. International box office, at least. Avatar: The Way of Water tops 850 million worldwide. Wakanda Forever passed 800 million worldwide. This is international box office. And of course, I just passed it. Coming out of its second weekend, James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water has banked an estimated $855.4 million globally through Sunday. The sophomore session added $168.6 million at the international box office for a it's made internationally $601 million. Overseas, the 20th Century Studios Disney highly anticipated sequel passed Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and Minions: The Rise of Gru to become the third biggest Hollywood grosser of 2022. It is also now the number 5 studio title of the pandemic era and will soon top No Time to Die's $613 million. The offshore drop from opening weekend was 42%. It's got a great hold. So that's amazing. So we're looking, it's not doing badly. Now remember, for those of you Avatar watchers, this movie is going to hit $1 billion way faster than Avatar 1 did. Now, will it continue on to march on to $2 billion? I don't know. But still, for a movie like this, to make this much money in a post-pandemic era is still pretty great. It's pretty exciting. And obviously, people want to go back to the theater and see it. So that's good. Anonymous sent in a tip and says, Rob, you're the man. I missed your thoughts on Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. You didn't say anything on the John Campea show. Also loved Babylon and Avatar 2. Happy holidays. Well, you know what? I've seen Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, and I loved it. Now, it was different than I expected it to be. I knew it was going to be darker, but I loved the whole production of it. I loved all of it. I didn't think the songs were as good as I wanted them to be, but I want to talk about it more at length. But I did like the movie quite a bit. Again, I wish I'd seen it in theater. Richard goes on to say, apparently the Witcher prequel is terrible. I haven't seen it, but I hear it's the same formula of having a woman of non-Caucasian origin being the reason for creation, whatever. This is tiresome. How long can this last? Even normies don't dig this anymore. Well, if it's, I don't know. Like, look, I honestly, here's a funny thing, for me, classical storytelling is the idea that you're going to take classical storytelling and subvert it. I have no problem. I watched a lot of Asian science fiction growing up and martial arts films growing up, Japanese, Chinese, now Korean, Indonesian, Vietnamese even. I love movies from all over the world. So I don't have a problem watching non-Caucasian stories. I've grown up, I watched Indian movies, Sachi Ray, the Apu trilogy. I've watched movies from around the world. I don't care who makes them, and I don't care the color of people that are in them. I personally believe that there's one race of people on this planet, the human race, and we have different ethnicities within that group of people. And I've never understood why we would, aside from the actual visual differences in us, and yes, certain size and shape differences too. But basically, depending on where you grew up geographically, why would anybody think that we're better or worse than people? It's all about culture. It's all about, who we are as individuals. So none of that stuff bothers me. What bothers me is shitty storytelling. And what's so weird to me is that we have a rich cultural history of cinema in countries all around the world. And yet we want to pretend like, let's change things around. And yeah, I understand. I mean, the roles that men and women have played have changed throughout history based on technology and based on theology and based on philosophy and all that. But are we going to right all the wrongs by... Here's the thing. It's the stories that are shitty, and I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. It's bad. Richard goes on to say, it's not the leftism I object to. The Soviet Union had a very successful film industry. They did. The Soviet Union not only did they make some great live action movies, they made great animated films too. I met my ex-wife. We worked together over the course of 3 years working for a company called Films by Jove that were bringing, it was a whole series of films called Masters of Russian Animation. And a lot of them are fantastic. Like you said, the Soviet Union did have a successful film industry. Communists wrote some of the best films of the 50s. They did. It's true. Because great storytelling transcends all of that. And as I always said, great stories are all about, you have to have a great character. Great characters and great stories should always come before your universe or your ideology. Whatever point you're trying to make should be built into the story. If you're wearing your ideology on your sleeve or you're shoehorning your ideology into a classical storytelling trope, you've already lost, I think. And we see a lot of that. There's a lot of shitty storytelling because it's weird. Storytellers all the great storytellers have messages to convey, but they were better writers. They didn't think of themselves as like they had the story to tell. The messaging that they had was built into that story, which is a little nuts. By the way, one of the super chats that I read that sort of disappeared was Roberto Suarez. I was talking earlier about last night I watched White Christmas for the first time. And Roberto Suarez made a comment that there is a song about a minstrel show in that movie. And it struck me. I was like, wow, that's interesting. I don't necessarily think you would hear about that today. But again, here's what I find. One of the things that I hate the most about the modern age is this new thing. I think this year was the first year I heard it. This idea of presentism. Presentism basically states that we are going to view the past through the lens of today, which I think is the dumbest shit ever. And anybody who's a presentist is an asshole. Because you cannot look back at the past of humanity and judge what was going on based on where we are today. That's a ridiculous notion. And sure, we can, on one hand, you can say, well, it's better that we're here than we were in the past. Right. But you have to understand, we have been on an evolutionary track since we came down from the goddamn trees. So to judge, if you're going to judge 1,000 years ago, how far you want to go back? Judging from where we're at now, we're at the highest evolutionary point in human history that we've ever been at. Even though we're losing our life expectancy is longer than ever. People have more rights. There's less war, less famine, less disease than there has ever been. Yeah, is our world still fucked up? Sure. And but for the most part, human life is way better than it was 1,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 100 years ago. With all of the problems that we have today, sure. But presentism, I hate it. I hate it all. I can't stand that. And I watch a movie like White Christmas and there's a song about a minstrel show. Does that mean like, uh-oh, from where our more elevated position here that we should get rid of White Christmas? Is the messaging in White Christmas? I mean, I will say this. It's a pretty white movie. But if that's what you're looking for, I would say the overall messaging of White Christmas is important. And ultimately you have three men, two of which went through a war with another man whose position in life is in question. Is he going to be put out to pasture, and is his value going to be eliminated from our world, or are his two friends going to come back and help him at the same time discover romance and song and fun and Christmas? You have to take the good with the bad, I guess, but we're not good at that. So yeah, but Roberto, I remember that was one of the questions that got sent in. So thank you for that. Let's see. Rob's Stable of Bitches. That refers back to a picture I put on Instagram of me as a 9-year-old. Merry Christmas, Daddy. XXOOXXO. P.S. The crowd demands a sexy Santa cosplay next year. Well, I'll do that. I'd give you that. I'd have to work out more. I got to get shredded. I got to get shredded. Mo Betaku says, do you think Nolan leaning more into World War II films coming forward? It seems like Tenet was a goodbye to his sci-fi movies, while Dunkirk and Oppenheimer are becoming his beginning stage for his war films. Ooh, Mo Betaku, that's a really interesting question. Here's the thing. I don't think so. I think that Nolan is still going to lean into his speculative side. As much as I kind of was disappointed by it, I find Tenet to be a very fascinating movie. Every time I return to it, I'm like, wow, I like watching this. But I think he's going to make more. I think he's more interested in terms of Oppenheimer. I mean, Dunkirk is a very British heroic story about how the everyman, talk about, what is it? Something in Carry On, that put whatever you want in front of it. That whole British stiff upper lip thing. I mean, how the normal British citizens set sail across the English Channel to go rescue their own countrymen. I think it was a great story. It's a World War II story, but and the idea of Oppenheimer creating the atomic bomb is not so much a World War. It happened during World War II, obviously, but I think it's about that part of the human spirit. And Oppenheimer, what it changed humanity irrevocably. I think Nolan's going to come back and give us something epic, whether it's sci-fi or I don't know what, but he's going to come back because he loves that and he's good at doing it. Mike Alito says, our boy Mikey says, I don't mind living forever, but my knees are killing me. Happy holidays to you and your extended family there and here. Well, Mikey, you're one of the great people I've had the pleasure of meeting through the PGS, so thank you. Merry Christmas to you, sir. But that's very funny. Your knees are killing me. But you know what? In our new future, that's a thing. You'll be able to get your knees replaced. You'll get gene therapy, or they'll just go in and make you synthetic knees. We'll be in the post-human world. I mean, it's so funny to me. We're always talking about trans rights. But what happens when we get into transhuman rights, where you won't just transition from one sex to the other? What happens when we're going to actually be able to extend our lives and change our genes and chromosomes and have half of our bodies be bionic? I mean, that's why I think the idea of trans rights and gender identity and all this is something that we're not, we look at it as an if and. I think this is the beginning of an ethical dilemma and we need to figure out what we think about all this, because as we move forward in technologically, we're going to have a lot of really fascinating moral and ethical questions to address when it comes to how we're going to be able to change ourselves, not just change our sex, but literally change humanity. What is human? And I think now is as good a time as any to begin really looking into the moral, ethical, technological implications and what does that mean? And we should start delving into these questions more so than we are now. And I hope we will, because I find them fascinating. James Lockman says, my absolute favorite episode from Star Trek The Next Generation was from Season 5, Episode 25, and it was called The Inner Light, written by Morgan Gindel. Yes, The Inner Light is one of the great episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, but I would point out that it is atypical. You know, it's funny because everyone talks about Best of Both Worlds and Yesterday's Enterprise, and that these are all sort of atypical Star Trek stories, and Inner Light is a great story. And for those of you who don't know, Picard is zapped by an alien probe, and it appears that he is sent to a planet, and he lives out a whole life where he grows old, has children, and dies on a planet that is suffering a horrific drought. There's no more water. And then he awakens back on the Enterprise bridge. He's revived, and turns out he was just there for minutes. But in his mind, he lived for that entire time. And the probe gave him the life of a person that lived on that planet. So in his mind, the years, the decades he spent on that planet were absolutely very real. And when he came back to life, he had lived that life. He had literally lived a life. And I can't imagine what that was like for him. And I think that episode's really compelling because the story's amazing. Jet Sangani says Michael Kamen and James Horner are underappreciated. I believe it. I don't know if James Horner is underappreciated. He wrote a lot of great scores, you know, and certainly Michael Kamen. Michael Kamen and his scores for the Lethal Weapon movies, you know, with using David Sanborn on sax and stuff like that. Yeah, Michael Kamen, his life both of their lives were cut short at early ages. And, you know, they wrote a lot of great stuff. Both of them had a pretty great career. Connor Stevens said, I just watched the Vinegar Syndrome 4K of Freeway for the first time. What a ride. Reese Witherspoon's acting blew me away. Sutherland is very creepy. Wow, you know, the fact that Vinegar Syndrome even put that out in 4K, I didn't even know that they did put that out in 4K. I would buy that. I did not buy their Roadhouse, but God bless them for selling out of that, because that's a great disc. So, yeah, I didn't know that. That's really interesting. But Reese Witherspoon, I like Freeway a lot, actually. I think it's a really good movie, a really good thriller. And young little Reese, she's lost none of her power. But that's actually, I've always liked that movie. Jordan Saylor says, I don't understand fans anymore. So many wanted to just reboot the DCEU, and now they're rebooting the DCEU, and people are mad that they're rebooting the DCEU. Yeah, look, it's hard. It's hard to be a fan now. It's hard out there for a fan. I don't quite understand it either. We live in an embarrassment of riches, but I will say this. We also live, to be a fan now, is to see all of the great IPs that were created usually by one person. They've all been co-opted by studios, and the people that are in charge are douchebags. I mean, I say that because I shouldn't say douchebags. I'm being hyperbolic. But they're being given, rather than find somebody that is passionate about, and that's not always to find somebody who really loves the property is not necessarily always a great thing, but it's a start. You need to find somebody that is a great creator. Like, look, I have friends that bitch and moan and complain about, like, Wednesday. I thought Wednesday was perfectly delightful. I have no love, you know, necessarily for the Addams Family or anything like that. I liked it growing up, but I'm not, you know, it's not something I'll go crazy about if it's not perfect. But I really liked Wednesday. And that's why I like Terry Metalis' Picard Season 3. Because he cares and likes and loves Star Trek. And he did all the things that you'd want to do, from getting more great music to designing a starship he wanted to design. Now, it's funny because everyone's going to nitpick. I'll say this. The Titan A that you see has elements of the Star Trek Phase 2 Enterprise in the warp nacelles. That show didn't ever happen. I like what Terry Metalis did. All those things. People talk about the lineage of ships. When Well, who's to say that they didn't go back to earlier designs because they wanted to for whatever reason? You know, there's never been a Star Trek episode that's necessarily delved into these things. I thought what he did was great. What's more important for me is characters and story. And the best thing about Picard season 3 is that you get to see all of our Next Generation cast in rare form. They're turning in great work. Their characters are well served. They're on a big, epic, fun story that also has huge implications. It's more of a motion picture story. In terms of its tone, it's 10 hours. Like, if you love First Contact, and I don't love First Contact, but it was the best Next Generation movie. Star Trek Picard Season 3 was made by somebody who cared. You know, somebody who did not bring an agenda with him other than tell a great Star Trek story. And unfortunately, I think fans are feeling burned because when you see, if you're a Doctor Who fan, man, I get it. When they go retcon the Doctors, here's what I can't stand about modern creators. Why is it, like, if I was given a franchise that was 50 years old, I would not be somebody that would say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to retcon everything we know about the creation of the Doctors and all that. I'm going to go, other than the fact that there was only supposed to be so many Doctors in a lifespan before they could stop regenerating. I get that. If you want to keep it going, you got to figure out a way canonically to make that work. Understand that. But to go back and do what they did, what Chibnall did about the history of Doctor Who and the beginnings of the time, I'm like, bro, you know what? It really wasn't for you to do that. There are certain things that you have to be able to do. You have to allow. There's certain things that have to be sacrosanct. And if you're controlling an IP, if you're the custodian of an IP, there are certain things that you shouldn't do. And of course, you know, you'd have to have somebody who's higher up that even knows what those things are. And that's the problem. You know, Star Wars is the people at the top, they don't know Star Wars the way fans do. So things get changed and nobody's the wiser, and it's a bummer. But fans, so that's why fans are pissed, and I get it because I'm one of them. Elon Abadi says Puss in Boots was the perfect Hanukkah movie in cinemas. Go watch it. It's perfect. Well, Elon, I will, because if I don't, Taylor Gonzalez at the John Campy Show will have my balls in a sling. I better go see it. Jeff Yerke, the man, the myth, the legend, Jeff Yerke, says, hey, Rob, season's greetings and all of our love, the Yerk Man and Mrs. Y. Mrs. Yerke, one day I want to meet you guys. I do. I want to come up there. Maybe I should just drive up there once and meet you guys. Kevin Morales says, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Rob. Got an Enterprise D Bluetooth speaker and white noise machine. That's cool. It's awesome. What cool thing you get now or ever? Well, Kevin, I waited 4 years to get this, and it showed up 3 days ago. I got my 1/6 scale Jazz Inc. 66 Batmobile for my 66 Burt Ward and Adam West Batman and Robin Hot Toys. And if you watch the Weekly Hero, we pre-recorded a Weekly Hero that will drop next week on the John Campy channel, where we did an 8-minute video showing that. It's dope. I just got that. It's amazing. It is amazing. And I've had shipped to me the rest of my part works from Japan so I can finally construct the 4.5-foot model of the Space Battleship Andromeda from Space Battleship Yamato, or AKA Star Blazers. So that's coming. Alexander Wilson says, I thought Offspring was an underrated episode of TNG, but TNG had so many great episodes, but DS9 was better. You mean Offspring with Lal, when Data created a daughter? That's a great episode, and that was the first episode that Jonathan Frakes directed. He just pulled that. It was great. Itchy Elbows said, I rewatched The Inner Light from TNG. Incredible. It was incredible. And by the way, if you sent me, I have to go to Christmas dinner now. If you sent me a super chat and I didn't get to it, I'm going to find it. I'm going to go talk about it on the next show. I'm sorry they disappeared, but I can go find them. Richard says, storytelling is about truth. And some of this woke stuff today is not about politics. You are not telling me the truth. You are not telling me your truth. And I don't believe deep down this is how you see life. That's a really good point you're making, Richard. This is what I can't stand. There are many people that for so long did not have a voice. And we have had to deal with all kinds of horror in our past. And people did not have a voice. No one had a voice to speak out. No one had anyone that would speak for them. And our history is full of humanity being horrible to members of itself. Horrible. However, I don't remember a time where storytellers decided to take it upon themselves to try and right the wrongs of the world by telling stories. Like, we've always had stories that have dealt with social justice. We've always had stories that have dealt with religious, racial, sexual persecution. But it's only recently where I feel that storytellers are getting on some soapbox to preach to us in some way where they're saying, if you don't believe this, you're wrong. And as I've said many times on the show, great stories do not tell you how and what to think. Great stories give you something to think about. You're supposed to think about, a great story will make you go, huh, do I really believe that? And if I do believe that, why do I believe it? Maybe I should. A great story will change someone's mind because the story itself is so engrossing and the story is so well told that it could change your point of view. That's what a great story does. And nowadays we have these storytellers that think they're going to take it upon themselves that they know better than their audience. Let me tell you what's wrong with the world. I'm going to tell you what you should or shouldn't think. That's weird to me. Because who are they to decide? How do they know more about me? How does that person know more about life than I do? Why? And it's bizarre that people take on that mantle. And to me, look, life is a constantly. Somebody once told me a long time ago. They said, you should never think that you know something entirely, because if you think you know everything there is to know about something, that means you stop thinking about it, and it means that you won't be open to accepting new information when it's revealed to you. That may or may not change your opinion. And I always thought that was a really good way to live. Because, I mean, hell, man, look at the James Webb telescope. It's freaking the cosmologists out. There's all kinds of, we send one telescope up 1 billion miles from the Earth, which, by the way, admittedly, a dope thing that happened this year. It launched on Christmas Day last year. The James Webb telescope launched a year ago today. And since it's been active, all of cosmology, some of it's been put into a tailspin because it's just, we've gotten more information than we've ever had before, and things we couldn't see, we can see. I think it's so strange that we walk around and presume we know everything when we don't even see all of the available light spectrum that's in front of us. Dogs see more light than we do. So how do we know that there are certain things about the universe that dogs know that we don't? It's just they can't convey. They don't know we don't have that information because they can see it. And two, they don't know how to convey it to us anyway. So I think it's a weird place that we're in. All I can say is that, you know what? The rarest thing on this planet is us. I've said it a million times. And I'll leave you with this. The Christmas thought is that on this planet, I know there's twins and all that, but in the cosmic infinitude of the universe, there is now and there never will be another one of you. You are unique to the universe, and there will never be one like you again. Ever. Of course, if you watch the Wachowskis, Jupiter Ascending, maybe through the course of the universe that maybe one day somebody will be reborn exactly like you, one of you, maybe. That's true, and that's an interesting idea. The Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, or manipulating the bloodline, so in 1,000 years, or 10,000 years, they can give birth to the Kwisatz the super being. They could do that. But until then, there's only one of you, which means you matter. I mean, think about it. It's what Dr. Manhattan said in The Watchmen, the thermodynamic miracle of life, that your mom and dad got together, had you, maybe not your mom and dad, maybe just the woman who birthed you and some rando she hooked up with. Either way, however it happened, there's only one of you, and it's a miracle that you exist, if you think about it. The cosmic infinitude of the universe, and why we're not even here for the blink of a galactic eye. But still, we're unique. We shouldn't be in such a hurry to want to dismiss each other. Because remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I wish all of you a very Merry Christmas. You know what? Here's the thing. I'm Jewish. Okay? I don't get offended when someone says Merry Christmas. I love Christmas. For this particular day, May 25th, there's nothing wrong. I celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. We celebrate President's Day. We have all kinds of holidays. We have Easter. I love Christmas because you can look at it as a religious holiday, or you can look at it as a holiday about goodwill to men and peace on earth. It's an imaginative holiday. When I was a kid, I liked the idea of Santa Claus existing. So Merry Christmas, everybody. And there's nothing wrong with saying it, because today we celebrate that, and ultimately the message of Christmas, peace on earth and goodwill to mankind. And I think that's a good message. And tomorrow we can celebrate Boxing Day or Kwanzaa. Hanukkah ends tonight. We're going to have New Year's Eve. Let's face it. Hell, holidays are good. And if it's a time to hang out with other people, or to take stock in your life and send text messages to people you haven't talked to all year and say that they were great, what's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that. As long as it doesn't end in horrible religious persecution for half the planet. But barring that, I want to thank everybody for watching the show. Thanks for being here on this Christmas stream. And if I missed your super chats, I'll get them on the next show. I promise. I apologize. And I will be back. I'm going to do shows all week. Tomorrow, we are doing, Dieter Bastian and I are doing Let's Get Physical Media episode, I think it's 92. And we have a special guest, Jeff, from the YouTube channel Films at Home. And we're going to talk about our 10 favorite best releases of 2020. Not necessarily the best releases in general, but our favorite releases, or you can say best. I didn't really define it, so that's what it's going to be. Tune in for that. We've never streamed with Jeff before, but that'll be exciting. And then I'll be doing Robservations all week long. And the next Designing Hollywood to drop is with Deborah Scott, the costume designer, the Academy Award-winning costume designer of Titanic and Avatar 2, The Way of Water. And with that, I will say to all of you, have a very Merry Christmas for the rest of, it depends where you are, but it could be already over. And we'll have a great time between Christmas and New Year's hanging out. And thank you for supporting the channel and all of that. And again, it's taking me way too long to end this show, so I'm just going to end it. So thank you all. And we'll see you tomorrow.